Last week, I said that that day we had the Russell rip and the NASDAQ drop was one of the weirdest days I've ever seen. Things really haven't changed much. This has been a fairly maniacal week, not just for the market, definitely in terms of the market, but also just overall. We had an assassination attempt on a former president and what now, according to betting markets, is the leading front runner for this current election season. How do you take all this into account in a market that's rallying right now? Is just bizarre. I think we need to take a bit of a beat, take a breath. I'm also getting a lot of messages from people. How do I prepare for November? What do I do? The market's already going that way. Who's on whose side? What trade is attached to whom? Probably way too early to start going down that route, especially when you have a market that's already had a massive run on the valuation side for the tech companies that matter the most, and we continue to struggle in that department, which is why my light on stocks is still yellow. It was green going into the big run up. The rotation I've been surprised by. The economic data don't seem to confirm it, but if we get a generous Jerome Powell and his next big speech, which will be Jackson Hole, possibly here things could really come together for just a whole new cycle. But generally speaking, there's a few things that are an issue. Number one is that we're still chopping around basically in NVIDIA's range. I wasn't joking for a long time when I said that I still think NVIDIA is way more important than the macro. I still think it is. And so NVIDIA still has this potential chop that could represent a failure to break out. The semiconductors basically look the same way. And as a result, the whole index in tech has been fading a little bit towards the closes. So could just be a consolidation. That would be fine. I think that's what the market kind of needs here. There's so much to process. We had this massive shift in the entire market regime, but it hasn't come with a very encouraging bond market shift. A few things just don't add up. This whole idea that there's going to be a rotation into economically dependent, the cyclical stuff. There's going to be fiscal coming down the pike in terms of spending from DC post-election, all these things. They could be true, but they also just don't quite add up in the market. We got a little tiny bit of bear steepening today, which is what you want to see. And generally, yes, we have seen this steepening of the curve, but the majority of, this is basically a slight bear steepener. All of this is the bull steepener. And that is exactly what happens historically in cycles when they're coming to a close and the landing is here. And it's no longer a debate about soft landing or hard landing. It's just that's where we are. And the uninversion of the curve by way of the Fed cutting is not really a preferable thing to happen. And so that's generally what the bond market has been telling us while the stock market's celebrating. If we get more days where you get bear steepening, like I've said many times before, you want a root generally for rates to go up for the economy. And that would be a little bit more encouraging message about growth coming in the future. The bond market is not sending a message about growth in the future, whereas it seems like some of the stock market is trying to. That just doesn't quite add up. Now, that being said, there are some real potential, obviously, impacts in markets if there's major political regime shift. And one of the things that folks are arguing is that Bitcoin has kind of been now attached to the Republican Party, which I could see that, that generally is the consensus. And I think when you look around, there's not like a lot of big chatter coming from the Dems on crypto. It's mostly been kind of pressure from a policy standpoint. But at the same time, Bitcoin did amazing in this administration and the one before that. And the coiners also argue that it's just a function of scarcity. So if that's really what drives value, it shouldn't really matter who's sitting in the White House. But that being said, you have to respect the charts and the technicals, and Bitcoin's big bounce here. I mean, that's a big bounce. It takes us back above 60K. So that's really the only thing that I think we need to adapt to right now. I think we are kind of seeing that Bitcoin does respond maybe, hopefully, to the possibility of regime change. But it still, I don't think, should overwhelm the actual fundamental use case or value. And technically, I think coiners think that too. But for now, it's going to go yellow on my risk radar in the possibility that maybe we shook out the shorts there and BTC can hold along for the ride, but everything else is keeping the same. We'll see how this week goes. Take a breath, take a beat. There's been some crazy stuff happening. Don't get too carried away in like building out a portfolio based on something that might happen months down the road. Have a good night.